Come on over, Rebecca.
Sing it. Sing it.
So you told me to sing today.
Are you going to sing
karaoke? Do you know I took voice lessons?
I didn't.
I can
piano
appreciate.
lessons. I can play for you while you sing.
Hi, friends. Hey, it's
This
Rebecca.
is Rebecca with the thing in her face.
A thing in my face. Oh,
Well, this thing. I had the
sure.
cursor. I hate.
Okay, so why do we have Rebecca over here?
Rebecca, what are you going to show us?
Well, I'm going to show you a wonderful new book.
I
It's
love this book.
put out by Lisa Alexander. She goes by Moda Lisa on Instagram. And this book is called Sisterhood of the Scraps.
Up close.
Sorry. Sisterhood of the Scraps. And it
And
has...
look at all those.
It has...
Look how cute they're displayed.
Yes, on chairs. It has a bunch of just books that you can...
Oh, I know. It was the shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Books that you can...
I just-
or quilts that you can make from scraps. And what I made was the Friendship Starter quilt. And I know a lot of people have used this quilt as bee blocks. And so...
Bead blocks. What do you mean by that?
So people do a quilt bee where they send... Oh, in fact, Girlfriends is doing a bee block where they have the pumpkins.
Oh, yeah.
And so everybody sends their blocks into a central location, and the blocks get divided up and sent back out. So I know people have done bee blocks for this quilt. And this is what the Friendship Starter looks like. And I actually have
cute.
one in real life that I made that you can see.
Together.
Oh,
And it
So
makes a
darn
really
cute.
huge quilt.
They're different sizes.
What?
Yeah, so we have some that are the bigger size and then some that are tiny. And these sew into 1-inch pieces. And so a little trick that I did on this book, because you end up cutting 1,800 squares.
1,800. 1,800.
So you have 1.5-inch squares.
1,800.
And you also have 2.5-inch squares. And so I didn't want to...
I love this trick, Rebecca. You're going to like this. You're going to like it.
I didn't want to count out all of the squares. So what I did was I counted out 100...
Wait, we need to pause. We need...
Dramatic music.
Yes.
I
Dun,
did.
dun, dun.
Okay, let me tell you guys.
No, this is amazing. You're going to like this.
Okay.
Yes. We
Okay.
built you
I'm
up enough.
excited.
Thank you. I hope you guys think this is as wonderful as I think it is.
I think it is.
So, do I have to hold this? I'm
No,
just going to put
no.
that down.
No.
I don't want to get glitter on my lips.
Pretty.
So, what I did was I counted out 100 2.5-inch squares, and
You counted out.
I counted out
100.
100, and because you have to cut, it's like I think 800 of the 2.5-inch squares.
Wow.
So what I did was I counted 100. I put it on a kitchen scale and I weighed it in grams. And so then what I did was to do my 100 squares, I just weighed it by grams, and it was very close at the end. And so also you have to have about 1,000 1.5-inch squares. And so again, I counted out the first 100 and I weighed it on my scale. And then that way, when I was picking my colors for the brights, I just this gets really complicated, but it's not that complicated. I added up how many grams I needed total and divided it by the number of colors that I had.
Wow.
And so I think I ended up needing, so for like there we go. The pink, I needed, I think it was 28 grams to equal the right amount. And then for the yellows, I needed 28 grams. And so that way I went through all of my colors. And the neat thing about this quilt is I made it all out of scraps that we had at the store. So
She really did. I watched her dig
really
through the box.
did. So have you guys talked about the scrap packs yet?
Nope.
Okay,
I
well,
haven't.
the scrap packs that we have, they are $5.95. Is that what you're doing the deal for today?
Well, that's what they normally
That's
are.
what they normally are. And each bag is a half a pound. That's my mom.
Is it really? Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Mom.
Are you sure it's your mom?
I'm 100% positive
sure?
because that's my mom and my dad.
Jerry Brown.
Bright red.
Jerry Brown is her mom.
Gracious.
Rebecca.
Okay, so the scrap bags that we have are 8 ounces, and that is just a little over 1 yard of fabric.
Oh,
So for
It's a yard?
it is a yard of cotton is between 6 ounces and 8 ounces.
she knows
I
so
didn't know
much.
that.
So much.
So for the brights
But
on that quilt, yes.
Do you know how an owl sleeps?
Jeez.
On its back.
Very carefully.
No,
I
on
guess.
his back. Going
In a
back.
tree.
I do know things.
I'm so
I know
glad.
things.
Perfect. Well, we all know things, so that's great. So call it a
I'm
recipe. It's okay. The quilt pattern, not the recipe.
I call them recipes too.
So I do. So the recipe calls for, I believe it's 2.5 yards of brights. So what I did was I got 3 scrap packs, and I was able to do my brights from that.
To do this whole quilt?
Yes, this whole quilt literally, okay, that's not true. The border around the edge, I got yardage for.
Okay.
But even the low volumes, which is Barb's favorite new term, is low volumes.
I'd never heard that until about a month ago.
So the low volumes are white with, sometimes white on white, sometimes white with a cream or a little pattern on top of it. And I used scraps for that. This recipe, or
It's a
this
recipe.
pattern
It is a recipe.
calls for 4 7/8 bags of the low, or not bags, yards of the low volume. So there's quite a bit of low volume, and so you can piece it together by getting.
Wow.
But the scrap packs are the way to go.
That is
Wow.
great.
So they would need, to make that quilt, they'd need 3?
So of the color, you would need 3,
All right.
and of the, hold on, I'm thinking, of the low volumes, you would need 8, probably 9 of the low volumes. But
Do we have that many?
I don't know that we have that many low volumes, so you guys can
Okay.
tell them about the scrap packs.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the scrap
Okay,
packs, but
what else?
first,
Yes.
But first, we're going to move Kyle's drink.
Yes.
Kyle's a drinker, by the way. We want to see the quilt bit.
Okay.
Chris is actually watching, and she asked to see the whole quilt.
The
Oh,
whole
my Lanta.
So you're going to have to stand back
This
in
is
So
North
big,
Logan.
you guys.
It is.
It's just a huge
Oh.
quilt.
Oh, let
So you
me.
made up- how much background did you have to get?
Look at how pretty that looks.
Okay. Okay, somehow.
Wow. We can see
You
it.
have to buy background. I mean, all of this stuff. Here.
Okay, so for the
Can you hear
borders,
us out there?
Uh,
Come on. You can unplug if you want to come.
Okay.
so with the borders on this particular quilt, it was 9 6.5-inch pieces. So I did buy the low volume borders. Now for all of these pieces, these are like 6.5-inch pieces prior to sewing them together, then they're 6-inch squares.
This really was from scraps.
This really 100%, I promise, I got all of these scraps from
Wow.
the scrap pack from my girlfriend's quilt shop. And the scraps come from, we have a kit room, and they make a whole bunch of kits, and so they have leftover cuts. And
they're not big.
well,
They're
no,
small.
some of the pieces are big, but this particular quilt, you only had 1.5-inch pieces, so I was able to really utilize a lot of the smaller scraps. But yeah,
That's cool.
it was all scraps.
I'm going to try it.
What are you going to do with this now?
Snuggle up on it when I watch movies.
I need a summer quilt for my bed. I was just thinking about that this morning as I was laying in bed.